ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jonas Kjellberg.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Jonas Kjellberg. I'm going to take you through the next hour. It's going to be a tough job after seeing what Bill did to you as an audience. But a bit short about me. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm an investor. I'm also an author of 3 books. And some of the stories and companies I've been part of was one of the things that really took off was a company called Skype, which I joined the founding offices very early on. Everyone said I was mad. It turned out to be okay. I then started doing some investments, and I invested in a company called the Rocket Internet. Everyone said that wasn't a good idea because, you know, why would small startups ever become big? Now the company is listed at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. I invested over 400 million euros in a company called Zalando. Anyone know it? Yeah? And when I talked to the analytics and the banker guys in London, they always said to me, you know, Jonas, who will ever want to buy shoes on the internet, you know? But it turned out okay. I was the chairman of the board for a company called iCloud, which I sold to Apple. I founded a company called Nanuba, which we sold to Yahoo. But I've done a lot of more things, but basically, my life has always been, how do you disrupt companies? How do you change the game? And how do you fuck up things for the big corporates in the world? How do you really take the things to a different level? Because everything for me has been about disruption, you know. But if this would be a normal lecture, I'll be talking about my successes. But basically what I'm going to spend the next hour on is basically talking about all my failures. Because the challenge is here, I've learned so much more of my failures than the successes. So I'm going to take you through that journey. But the thing is, I often have very strong opinions about things I completely don't know anything about. So if this was a normal lecture, I'd be standing here, doing it on my own. But let's flip coin this around. You have enormous talented people here. So let's see if we can do this together. I know we're a big crowd, but let's try anyway. Why not do the things that don't work? But let's start with the first question. Is it the big that beat the small, or is the fast that beat the slow? Hands up for fast that beat the slow. And hands up for the one that big that beat the small. No one? God damn, you're recipe. You're killing everyone there out there, and you're big. I think this is the challenge, and this is what also, this was the confusion in my mind. When do things actually be possible to disrupt? When can you fuck up things? It's not always obvious. So I had the opportunity to go to Stanford and start lecturing about my entrepreneurship journey, which was great. The students loved me. You know, I said what I thought was needed to be said. But after a while, Tom Kosnick, one of the professors, came to me and said, Jonas, it's great that you come here. Students love you, but you actually need to start reading the literature before you actually lecture at Stanford. Okay, fair. That seems like a fair point. So give me the literature, and I started reading all of it. How many here have read American management literature? Hands up. Well, if you have, my conclusion was most of these books are actually shit boring. And after you read the summary, you get the theory. After the first chapter, you're really clear about it, and then you have like 450 pages left of the book. So I went to Tom and Lena and said, why don't we write a book about all your research, Tom, that you've done at Harvard, and then you moved to Stanford, and let's build this book about all your theories, how you run a company. He said, great, let's do that. And I thought he was thinking about this big Bible of all his knowledge. And I told him, Tom, let's write a book that is only 100 pages and half has to be pictures. He was not totally convinced, but I said, let's do it anyway, you know. The world needs something different. So we put it out in beta, and we sent it to all of his colleagues at Harvard. What do you think they said when they saw this book? Great, Tom, you've done a children's book. I know you're progressive there at the West Coast, but this is not really a book for the East Coast, guys. Well, I said, okay, Tom, you know, relax. They don't understand the brilliance of this. Let me go talk to all the publishers in the world. They will definitely understand. What do you think the publishers said when they saw this book? Jonas, all books, great management books, are 450 pages long and have no pictures. And then you get these great letters like, thank you, Mr. Kjellberg. We wish you great success somewhere else. What do I do with that kind of information? So it pissed me off. So I said, how hard can it be to publish a book? You know, you print it on paper. It's not that very advanced. So we did. And we started selling it. And since I was pissed because they didn't understand my brilliance, and this happens quite a lot, we developed and wrote a new book, Business Creation, and this book has only pictures. It's great to give CEOs this one, they get a bit confused. Now, the third book, a green book, is published by Wiley, one of the most prestigious publishing houses in the US and UK with most Nobel Prize winners. Why do you think they published the book? Yes, correct. It's selling. And to be honest, I think that's the only reason they actually wanted to publish the book. Because in the end, a lot is about greed. And I managed to prove it to them. So now hopefully the book is coming out in China, so we actually can see some great numbers. But what is the book about? Well, the book is about the framework that Tom created. And the interesting perspective around this is in the centerpiece of all successful companies is customer acquisition. And this is where basically my journey started. I actually had the opportunity to start out as a CEO assistant for this company, Kinnevik, that I came back and did all the investments into Zalando and so on. And as a CEO assistant, you cook coffee, you repark cars, you do a shitload of PowerPoints. We sold a couple of companies, we bought 2 companies, and we IPO'd 3 companies during that year. And what is still tradition at this company, Kinnevik, is after this first year, you should become the CEO for one of the subsidiaries. And that is exactly what happened to me. I'd spent 1 year with top management. I had a double degree in marketing and engineering, so of course I should become the CEO of a subsidiary. So, you're all leaders out here. What's the first thing we do when we become the new CEO or a leader of a company? Talk to customers, that's a good idea. Why should I do that? I just got a great corner office, you know. Someone else could meet them. But what do we learn at school? Yeah, you have to have a strategy. So I sat down and I did all these PowerPoints and I started working Excel and I was really good at it. But that's where it basically hit me. The only thing I would be evaluated on was basically sales. And have you ever thought about that? How great it is to add customer in Excel? How easy it is? It's a brilliant tool, huh? But I had nowhere to go. So basically, I panicked a bit because since I studied both technology and economy at the same time, I skipped a lot of the economy sessions. So I went back and started flipping through all of my books to find that chapter around sales, because it seems to be very important. And I found this model in nearly all of the textbooks. What is it? It's the Boston Consulting Group's growth share matrix. It's in a lot of books, so it must be shit important. So, do you think they gave me the star company? Of course not. Did I get a company that was actually making money? A cash cow company? Of course not. What did I get? I got the dog. And what do you do with the dog in this model? You kill it, of course, you divest. So this model didn't give me anything, yeah? Being a CEO was totally useless. So I found a Akers SWOT model. How many here has done a SWOT model? It's a brilliant tool, huh? Let's put Jonas Kjellberg in there 20 years ago. What comes out? A lot of weaknesses, huh? A lot of weaknesses. So, if you're now the CEO of a company and have no clue on how to run it, what do? Management consultant, of course. I didn't have the guts to take in management consultants. Someone else said, maybe you could hire a sales guy. And I said, that's also maybe a good idea. I was young, ignorant at this point in time, so I thought, this seems too important, so I need to learn. Now I know it's great. You hire a sales guy, and then you basically distance yourself from the guy, and when it doesn't work out, you fire him later. It's brilliant, but I was young, I was naive, you know. But this was difficult. This didn't learn me anything. So, how do I take it from here? Well, the advice I got was that I needed to get this kind of big commercial agency, and we had to redo a totally big branding strategy before we actually could start selling. Felt very logical. So I went around, found this great company, and they built a strategy for me that I needed about 3 million euros of branding before we actually could start selling. Felt very logic. Now I just had to go back to the board and ask for the money. You go back to Kinnevik, it's this big, investment company at the front end of the sea in Stockholm. You go up, 5th floor, and you sit outside as a deputy CEO, and you wait until it's your turn to come into the board meeting. And we had this really famous founder, Jonas Kjellberg. And we came in, and he asked me, how's things in the real world, Jonas? And things are great, redone the strategy, redoing the company, we're going to take everything. All this corporate bullshit I was really good at. And we sat down, the meeting started, and I only had 2 points on the agenda. One is, I needed to buy a new billing system, and I needed that money for the marketing. So, Jonas, what's on the agenda? Well, first point is, I need a new billing system. Then I can see how the founder just goes like, oh, you idiot. And he throws the pen on the table and literally screams at me. Why do you need a billing system, you idiot? You don't have enough customers. At that point, I decided to get rid of point number 2. And I told him with my youth ambitions, then I'll be back with customers. And then I left. This is where I really had my first falling down moment in business. When you take the elevator down, 5 years of school and studies over your head in depth, and when you get the opportunity, you flunk it big time. Brilliant. So, what are the options here? I could move to Australia, take up surfing. I could definitely change my name. Yeah. And I basically had nowhere to turn to. So it ended up, I called my father, and he was very surprised. He said, Jonas, you've never, ever asked for advice before in your life. You must be in a very shitty position before you ask me for advice. Yeah, well, I spent, 5 years at the most prestigious schools in Stockholm, and I don't know the key element of running a company, and that is sales. I'll say, okay, I have an old friend that you should talk to. And I had the opportunity to meet a guy called Lars Nyberg. He was the CEO for a company called NCR. And he gave me a small brochure that he had kept from one of his first jobs. And it was 100 knack, 10 snack, 1 tack från en framgångsrik Electrolux-försäljare. That's basically, you need to do 100 knock on the doors, have 10 talks, and then you get 1 yes from a famous vacuum clean sales guy. But this was the first time I understood some kind of what is a pipeline model. And since I was an engineer, this was the first time it makes sense. You do 100 knocks, you do 10 talks, you do 1 yes. If you do 200, you sell more. It's not complicated. Since I was an engineer, this was basically just frequency. How do you increase frequency? So, we started running up through doors. And I'm still amazed when I meet companies today how little time and energy is spent in trying to re-innovate in how do you work with frequency. How do you take this numbers game to a total different level? What are the things you can do, and how can you add frequency into your product and everything you do? But this was a very simple telco company, so we actually started running through, and knocking on doors. So according to these classical pipeline models, what do you do when you've called all of Sweden? You call again, huh? It's just your first no to yes. The thing is, we were engineers, and we came to the conclusion, calling all of these phones took quite a lot of time because, people weren't answering and so on. So we said, what happens if we actually call 10 calls at the same time? And we can actually program that. And when one call is connected, we'll actually put it through to the operator. The second thing was that we needed to buy all these phone numbers from all these telco companies that sell these phone numbers to companies and private people and so on. And that cost a lot of money, nearly up to €1 per address. So we came to the conclusion, what happens if we call all number combinations available in Sweden? Because the brilliance here is that the computer never complained if it called to a customer that didn't answer. Until one day, when the red phone rings at this secret Navy base in Stockholm, at Muskö, and someone asks her, yes, Navy officer, and this phone is only for the Prime Minister, and some guy's like, hi, we're from Optimal Telecom, would you like to buy some cheap telephony? I had to spend a full day with Swedish secret police before I could convince them that we were so stupid that we actually called all the number combinations available. They were like, no, where did you get that number? It's a secret number. You just call all number combinations and we'll figure it out. So, do you think it worked? Do you think I got sales done? It actually worked really, really well. So for me, driving frequency and increasing it was the holy grail. But the trick question is, do you think it would work today? No, probably not, because people are sick of calling. There's true callers and other software that's taking away these services. So what you need to do is that you need to innovate in frequency. But for me, I found this little brochure, and everything for me was just, how do I get into a company and increase frequency? I started a new telco company, came in, increased frequency, we listed that, started another one, focused on sales, frequency, sold that to Vodafone. Life was super simple. I found the Holy Grail. The only thing I did when I came in is, how do I increase frequency? And I don't know, maybe it's a Swedish thing, but in Sweden we say, ett skott, ett träff. Basically, you aim once and you fire once and you hit it. But, I spent a lot of time looking at what the US guys did, and they basically just fired at everything. So life was quite simple, life was great. I felt, again, I was the great CEO. Then I had the opportunity to go down to Germany and become the CEO of a very interesting company that I thought was the future in disrupting the way of media. I became the CEO of a company called Lycos. How many here remember the company Lycos? Yeah, what did it do? It was the world's second largest search engine in the world, owned by companies like Bertelsmann and Telefonica. I was basically going to take my frequency engine to a totally different level. But what do you think happened basically the first day I started there? A shitty little company in Palo Alto started. Google. They even built their servers with Lego. Get real. So when a shitty little company starts in a garage in Palo Alto, what does a big company like Bertelsmann do? Exactly, nothing. And when we've done nothing for a while, and they're still around, what do? Well, we started making fun of them, They don't even have a business model. How will they ever survive? But then, they were really gaining some traction in the US, so we sat down and said, okay, maybe they can succeed in the US, but they will never be able to conquer Europe. Huh? But they were actually getting some traction. So after a while, we sent over our M&A team there, the best guys from Germany. What do you think they came home with? Ridiculously. What kind of pricing for a money that is not making any money and no revenue? Stupidity. We can laugh at it, but how many here would actually invest into Uber at the $60 billion US valuation? Hands up, anyone? Then you think maybe they must have a lot of cars on their balance sheet, huh? No cars. And then you look at the rest of the industry. Taxi companies must be making a lot of money. No. Well, to continue the story, I was really depressed, so Google talked about always delighting the user. And this was a totally new word for me because, my life had always been about always delighting the shareholder, myself, or Jan Stenbeck or someone else. Customer is something we just drove through the door to pay us good salaries and sell the company. But even how things went, it didn't go well. So I went to my boss, Felix, and I said, Felix, they're killing us. We need to think outside the box here, Felix. And Felix is a very prominent Swiss guy, very good guy. And he looked at me and said, Jonas, there is a reason we have the box. Because you should be inside the box and not outside the box. Otherwise, we will not have the box. Of course not. So I just went back and pushed my sales throttles. Google said, you know, content is king. I just said sales is King Kong, and then I just fully went for it. How do you think it went? Epic failure. Epic. So what did Google do? They created a better product. And if you're a simple sales guy, that's not okay. So what they did is what we define as delight. What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say the word delight? We've actually taken this from the hierarchy of customer needs. Who knows unique selling proposition? It's basically the same thing, but it works like this. At the top, you have your delight. In the middle, you have efficiency and functionality. I can give you an example. Alfa Romeo, they've always tried to have a great delight in their design. The problem here is, if the car doesn't take you from A to B, the basic functionality, there is very little delight. Any Alfa owners in here? They just become less and less over time, you know. But sometimes, I had this last time, Francesco stood up and said, Jonas, you don't understand, it's a beautiful car. And everybody else said, but yeah, but Francesco, it doesn't work. No, you don't understand, you know. It's beautiful. And, you know, it doesn't work, it's not a problem, because I get a personal relationship with my mechanic. Well, Francesco, that's not delight. That's something else. So be aware of that. If the relationships are very important, could be a challenging of your delight. Another company that had very clear delight was this company. Volvo. What was their delight? Safety, huh? What is their delight today? It's not as clear, huh? Because the challenge is here for Volvo that during a period of time, they added a lot of safety features. But what do you think happens to delight when you have 24 airbags and all cars rate like 5 stars in an NCAP rating? But what happens is that your delight falls in and becomes functionality. And this is often where the big companies get it wrong. They've been so focused. This is the time for disruption. I meet a lot of companies, big and small, especially in the startup world. When I meet them, they're so focused in trying to understand tomorrow's delight, to change the game. They have no functionality, they have no efficiency. And then I meet these big, huge corporations. And they're so focused on efficiency and functionality, they have no capability of trying to define delight. But delight is difficult. Let me give you an example. Harley Davidson, during the 80s, was facing fierce competition from the Japanese motorcycle. They were faster, they were better, had better quality, better fuel consumption, everything was better. So if you're a US CEO and this kind of competition happens, what do? Well, what they did is said, this is cheating. So they went to their local Congress and they defined a 15% ban on imports of Japanese motorcycle. We kicked them in the gut there, yeah? But it really didn't work, They were killing them. So the management team had to go together. The company went into Chapter 11. They said, okay, let's really start looking at what are our key assets here? Who are our main customers that love the product the most? Hell's Angels. And they're not very well known for paying their bills, are they? No. Motorcycle is loud, it breaks down. Okay, we got something to work on here. We need to define the delight. And what they decided at that point, and still keep, is what we sell is the ability for a 43-year-old accountant to dress in black leather, ride through small towns, and have people be afraid of him. That is our delight. And this is our innovation intent. It was not about selling functionality of going from A to B. It was selling the possibility of being an outlaw 30 minutes a weekend. And they're doing it really well. But delight is difficult, you know. I often talk about friction-free storytelling. When I also now, which is very ironically, I actually work as an advisor for Boston Consulting Group and their digital ventures. And when I come in, I often ask a very simple question to the management board, like, what are you selling? It's a very simple question. Huh? How often do you think I get a straight answer? Very, very seldom. Often I get this like, yeah, well, Jonas, it's so complicated we are doing, and we're such a big company, we can't really explain it. And then I say, well, if you in the management team here can't explain it, how should your sales guys or even the customers you sold things be able to explain it to their friends and family why they bought your products? Basically, what's your delight? What's your friction-free storytelling? But this is difficult. It's so much more difficult. I had the possibility of having Stefan Persson, the founder of H&M, in one of my telco boards. And he talked very passionate about it taking him 10 years to define what H&M was. They were a low-price company selling clothes with their own brand. And it was okay, but it was not really taking off. And they struggled a lot with it. Until, after a lot of thinking, 10 years of pain and misery, they came to the conclusion, from today on, we're a fashion company. But we're going to have a price, a zero less on the price tag. That's what we are. We're a fashion. And they said, okay, if Prada can be on Fifth Avenue, so can we. If Gucci can use supermodels, so can we. And they've been there. If you want to work for a low-price clothing company, that's the door. From today on, we're a fashion company with a zero less on the price tag. And then you can say, okay, let's look at this. H&M, they've done a really beautiful story for all of their shareholders. And a lot of low-pricing companies have failed. Then comes this another company called Inditex, Zara. How many shop there? Yeah, quite a lot. They don't even say that they're a clothing company. They're a logistic company. They're about being first with the latest. They can see what's on the catwalk in New York and have it in their stores in 2 weeks. They do small sample, sees what sells, and replenish it and re-sews it. They actually have overcapacity in their sewing plants to be able to change and rapidly fast. Doing an even better story. Then comes Zalando. They don't even see themselves as a fashion company. They see themselves as a tech company. I was in the board and we looked at the front page and I was like complaining, hey guys, this looks like shit. We need to make it a bit more cooler, more fashion. And they just looked at me and said, Jonas, never underestimate the bad tastes of Germans. The head of fashion was from BCG. Everything for her was just an Excel sheet. What sells? They want plastic leather boots for 29 euros. Let's sell it to them. So I think this is the challenge, trying to understand how do you move these things forward. We talked about frequency. It's very important that you have frequency and how you innovate in it. So basically ask yourselves, how can we increase it? You need to have a very, very strong product. How strong is your delight? How can you fit that together? Because without a good delight, it's going to be very difficult to sell your product. But you need something else. You also need a business model. And this has been, a painful process. I've tried to figure my way out of it. And often when I start companies, I don't have a clue about the business model. But then we invent it later when the success is there, and then we tell everybody how smart we were. But often, I don't have a clue. We'll just try to figure it. It's like, I often tell my colleagues, like, let's cross that bridge when we get there. But there's a lot of times I have not been able to cross that bridge. So, business model. As you heard, I had the opportunity to be part of, the starting team at Skype. And I just failed miserably with Lycos. So we sat down and said, okay, what is the ultimate delight for a phone call? Calling from A to B. Free. And everybody said, but that's stupid. And listen, let's wait there, let's keep that thought. It needs to be free. Okay, then we radically need to do things different. So we started the innovation in zero game. If we were going to price the service as free and not 50% below Telenor or anyone else, we needed to start innovating. So, a telco and Skype. A telco builds infrastructure, they just love doing it, And we said, okay, we could actually use the existing internet. And by so on, we created our first zero, because the customer paid for their internet. A telco buys Ericsson or Siemens switches to code the call. The interesting perspective is that the CPU power in the Ericsson switch was basically the same as in a normal computer. So we said, what happens if we code all the calls in the computer that the customer has bought? We found our second zero. Okay, looking good. Now we just need to transfer all these calls all over the globe. A lot of shitty internet out there. So to be successful, we would actually need a lot of voice over IP gateways from Cisco or someone else, racked all over the world to try to manage this network. How many here has used Skype or used Skype? Cool. Well, in the early days, how often did you come back without using your computer and your computer was very hot and the fan was going at max? Because if that was the case, your computer had become a supernode and all traffic was transferred through your computer. Because we came to the conclusion there was a lot of CPU power connected to the internet but not being used. That's why you never could crack the code of Skype, because we didn't want people to find out. And this was brilliant because there is actually a lot of governmental buildings that actually have great processing power, good internet, but are not using their computers. So we could channel the company, a lot of traffic through, even like big corporates. We found another zero. What do you think would happen if I went to SAP's legal department and said, I had this great idea. We're thinking about channeling a lot of traffic through every computer we can find out there. Maybe you're very more pragmatic, but in the company's outcome, they would not really be very happy around it. So we come far. Second thing is that customer service in a telco could sometimes stand for 25% of all the costs. And this was a challenge for me. Because my challenge was, I was often more pissed after I talked to customer service than before. So we came to the conclusion, maybe there's a negative delta of calling customer service. So we thought, okay, let's make it impossible to call Skype. Let's not have any phone numbers on our business cards. Let's put the company in Luxembourg so no one can talk to us. And just take it completely out of the map. The only thing we did, We had one big uninstall button, so if you didn't like that your computer was hot, you could actually click a button and everything disappeared. And we found another 0. So this is one of the basic elements. And then you go back to Tom Kosnick and his research. And he's looked at many of the most biggest companies in the world with the biggest growth have all innovated in zeros. Give me an example of a company that's been really good at innovating in zeros. Google, huh? Google is a great example. What did they do? Think about it. They took all the data and all the commercial, all the information they could find on someone else's server, placed it on their own server, and started selling advertising. Quite an interesting perspective of a media company, huh? Other companies? Facebook is a good example. They get you as their customer to drive all of their content. What about this company? Maybe we should start there. Is there any delight flying Ryanair? It's not that very clear. Do they have a friction-free storytelling? It's cheap. But what did they do? They did not just innovate in zeros, they innovated in revenues. Before, when you flew, you got coffee for free. What do you have to do at Ryanair? Pay for it. Before luggage was free, what do you have to do for it? Pay for it, huh? Do they call the major airports and say, hey, we would like to negotiate down the price here? No, what do? They call, small cities outside the big cities and say, hey, if you give us 3 million euros this year, we consider landing at your airport. And the government is like, that's not how it works. You pay us. No, because you pay us because we're going to bring a lot of possibilities for you to employ people in your little town, so you pay us. And they get their 3 million euros. If you work for Ryanair, do you think you get paid? You're a bit worried, huh? Happy you should be at SAP doing so well. Well, at Lufthansa, they pay for your training if you want to be a pilot. Do you think Ryanair pays for their training? No, what do you have to do? You have to pay for it. And then when you're done, at Lufthansa, you get your suit. What do you think you have to do at Ryanair? Pay for it, of course. Any pilots in here? Well, if you are, because they pay for their own training, but after the training, you need 3,000 hours of flight hours before you can actually become a fully certified pilot. And during that time, Ryanair are so utterly nice, they actually hand out their aircraft for free for people to train on. Ryanair has even gone so far that today you have to, if you're applying for a job, you have to pay 40 euros to send in your application. What do you think has happened with the number of applicants? Gone down. What do you think has happened with the quality of applicants? Gone up. What can we do then if we're successful managers? We can fire a lot of people and reorganize the whole HR department. So today, the HR unit is a profit unit. Think about it. Maybe you should just knock on HR's door when you come back, had a great conference, met this crazy guy. Maybe you should be profit unit. But all of these thinking is trying to see how do you define and outthink And how do you innovate in zeros? Let's take another company which I really enjoy. IKEA. What did they do? How did they innovate in zeros? You had to assemble your own furniture. Said it couldn't be done. You even become a warehouse worker when you're in the store, age 49. How did that happen? But the interesting thing which I really enjoy with IKEA is how they've actually thought through their customer acquisition as well. Because what happens when you walk into an IKEA store? It's a long, painful process. And then you get down and you come into the warehouse. You have to start picking up your own stuff. Then you have the cashiers, and after the cashiers, what's after the cashiers? The hot dog, of course. What's the price of a hot dog? 50 cents. Some of these first German IKEAs were actually franchised. So this guy, he comes along, the owner there of the franchise, he says, okay, but maybe here, you know, what happens if I change the price to 5 euros? People are totally devastated after this. He sold 98% as many sausages. He was super proud. Ingvar Kamprad comes along, the founder, and sees this. He shows him, hey, we can charge 5 euros for the hot dog. What do you think IKEA, what do you think Ingvar says? Well, he becomes furious. He says, you don't understand. The last thing you should remember after buying things at IKEA is it's cheap. Okay? And you should never try to assemble or put the furniture into your car on an empty stomach. So this is a very, very important part. But even more, are there salespeople approaching you at IKEA trying to sell you stuff? No, they're not. Huh? They're actually specifically told that you should not talk to them, to the customers. Only if you address them, they will help you. Wouldn't they make more money if they had some really aggressive salespeople in the aisles? Probably. But you know, today my wife forces me to go there and buy these kind of candles, and I would never do that if I had to run through this, you know. So how do you think they think about frequency? If they want to add frequency, how do they think? How can we add more aisles without people becoming totally insane? And how often do you go to IKEA and come home with what you intended to buy? Think that's intentional? Because the thing is, if you come to an age 48 here and there is out of stock, what do you have to do? You have to come back. It started as a CapEx project to getting warehouse costs down. But the result is that people had to come back. And what do you have to do then? To go all the way through. And then IKEA knows that you're going to purchase for 283 more euros. And then maybe some of you out there says, Jonas, but there's some shortcuts now. Yeah, I know, you've been to IKEA. The reason for that is, otherwise, if you're unlucky, you can be trapped in this kind of infinity loop. Where you never get out of IKEA. And that's bad for business. So it's a very cool way that they integrated product, customer acquisition, and also their business model. But what do they do more? We're going too fast here. I mean, the Catalogue, yeah? Ingvar Kamprad invented spam. Who asked for that catalog? It's the second most published item in the world after the Bible. Think about it. He just sent it to everyone. But he did it in such a way where you can actually see, you know, no commercials, please, but please the IKEA catalog, at least in Sweden. So, when you start a new business, if you want to disrupt things, I think the biggest challenge here is try to understand how can you add frequency into your delight, but also connect it to your business model. How can you innovate in zeros? If you have a P&L and maybe you have 10,000 line items, what of those line items should we actually invest in? And what of those line items should be zero? Think about it. I think from a European perspective, it's often like, let's cut costs with 5% all across. I would say you choose. Either opening an iPhone is part of the value proposition, so they spend money on it. Dell would not. It's not about taking down small costs, it's about basically making them to zero or investing heavily in the ones you believe in. For me, everything I do is innovate, don't imitate. This is very, very different or difficult. And then you say, but Jonas, you invested in the Sauer brothers. They were the copycats of the world. This doesn't work. No, but they innovated in a game-changing way how to build companies faster, more rapidly, more aggressive. So you need to ask yourself as a leader, are you a game changer? Are you willing to change the game and take the thoughts and ideas so far beyond that you leapfrog the perceptions? Or are you now a performer? The challenge is, many of these big corporates, both of these things don't actually match. So let me give you an example. I know you had Clayton Christensen here as well. And I think if you ever read one book, you should read his. But it's actually shit boring, but it's a very good conclusions in it. And the thing here is that the company that invented the railroad up in the mountain was not the same company that invented the chairlift. Because initially, they just laughed at these guys. Who wants to go up the mountain in a hammock? But over time, it became better. It was 10 times as cheap. And over time, also, the skiers actually liked not taking off their skis. Today, the same company is laughing at the companies that are actually sending people up with drones to the top of the mountains. They often kill themselves on the way up and not on the way down. So, of course, laughing about it. But the secret sauce is, are you really true to your delight? To how you build innovative frequency into your product? And how do you innovate in zeros? How do you take away costs that are not needed? Said Bill talked about it. Tell the truth. Tell it to yourself. Say how it is. Because that's the only way you're going to take the next step. Because if you utterly want to be the game changer as you are today and continue doing that, you need to think beyond. You need to think in a different way. And then you say, okay, great, Jonas, you've been up on stage here talking about this, but could you really apply this? I say, it's not that difficult. What do you sell? Simple. To who? And why? 3 simple questions to ask yourself. I can even ask my son this, when he's running his business, Philip. Philip, what are you selling? Well, I'm selling cookies. Okay. To who are you selling this? What's your target audience? I'm selling it to the people that enter the local community train. Okay. Why are you doing this, Philip? Do you have the passion to build this great company? I'm doing it because I have to. Okay, we need to make money for a class journey, okay? But then his father, he can't stop really there, so he's like, Philip, but how have you innovated in zeros? And then he thinks for a while and says, well, if mother buys the cookies, I actually make much more money. I say, great, you've just innovated in your first zero. Thank you very much. That was all for me.